Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump is doubling down on his claim that the FBI had what he calls a spy in his campaign.
So how do you like the fact they had people infiltrating our campaign? Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
The president repeated his claim in Nashville last night. He said last week that the use of an informant could be, quote, one of the biggest political scandals in U.S. history. Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina is chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. He attended a classified Justice Department briefing last week in response to the president's allegation. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. You have looked at the actual evidence here in this briefing. The president has not. You said, having looked at this, you said, I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what Americans would want them to do when they got the information they did. Why did you say that? How can you be so sure?
Well, when the FBI comes into contact with information about what a foreign government may be doing in our election cycle, I think they have an obligation to run it out. I think the FBI, if they were at the table this morning, they would tell you Russia was the target and Russia's intentions toward our country were the target. The fact that two people who were loosely connected with the Trump campaign may have been involved doesn't diminish the fact that Russia was the target and not the campaign.
So you looked at this and you said what the FBI was doing was kosher. Why does the president keep saying what he's saying when he knows better?
I don't know. I've never met or talked to the president. I cannot tell you.
You've never met or talked to President Trump?
I have not.
But what he is saying, just to be clear, about this being somehow out of bounds, based on your experience and the evidence you saw, that's not the case.
Well, think back to what the president himself told James Comey. He said, I didn't collude with Russia, but if anyone connected with my campaign did, I want you to investigate it. It strikes me that that's exactly what the FBI was doing.
Let me ask you some specific questions. Was there a spy?
That is not a term I've ever used in the criminal justice system. Undercover, informant, confidential informant, those are all words I'm familiar with. I've never heard the term spy used.
So when the president says Spygate, that's not there was no spy inserted into the campaign. Have you seen any evidence of that?
I have not. That's an espionage term. That's not a law enforcement term.
You believe the FBI acted properly in this matter?
Based on what I have seen, I don't know what the FBI could have done or should have done other than run out a lead that someone loosely connected with the campaign was making assertions about Russia. I would think you would want the FBI to find out whether or not there was any validity to what those people were saying.
And since you've been a prosecutor, can you explain to people who may not know what an informant is, an FBI informant, and why there may have been one who helped the FBI but was not inserted into the campaign?
Informants are used all day, every day by law enforcement, and they are sources of information. You call them confidential informants because you don't want everyone to know they have a relationship with law enforcement. I can't think of any major case I handled in 20 years where there was not someone willing to provide information. It's up to law enforcement to go validate or ratify the information, but you have to have people coming forward, and then what law enforcement does is up to them.
Do you think it's misleading for the president to keep using the term Spygate? Is that frustrating to you?
I'm a lousy politician. I was an okay prosecutor. Informant, undercover, confidential informant, those are words I'm familiar with. I'm not good at marketing. I'm not good at branding.
I know, Congressman, but he keeps using the phrase Spygate. Do you think that's misleading?
I think his lawyers have an obligation to go share with him what Devin and Paul and I saw last week. And I'm convinced that when he sees it, he's going to say, you know what? That's what I told Comey I wanted the FBI to do.
The reason the president has been talking about this is that, and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has tried to raise questions about the Mueller investigation for the purposes of not having the president talk to Mueller. Do you see anything, have you seen anything that would suggest that the president should not talk to Mueller?
The opposite. I think the president should tell Mueller in private what he has told all of us in public, which is he didn't collude with Russia. He doesn't know anything about it. And if anyone connected with his campaign did, he wants the public to know it. I think that's what he ought to tell Mueller.
Let me ask you about the front page of what the New York Times is reporting today, because it's potentially very serious. And that is the president of the United States berated his attorney general, asked him to reverse his decision in terms of his recusal of the Russia investigation. If he did that, made that conversation, said reverse yourself, would that constitute obstruction of justice?
I don't think so. I think what the president is doing is expressing frustration that Attorney General Sessions should have shared these reasons for recusal before he took the job, not afterward. If I were the president and I picked someone to be the country's chief law enforcement officer and they told me later, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to participate in the most important case in the office, I would be frustrated too. That's how I read that is Senator Sessions, why didn't you tell me this before I picked you? There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. Mm-hmm. He could have picked someone else.
Yeah, your Republican colleagues, are they on board with the way you're speaking out? You're breaking ranks with some people.
I will tell you this, the ones that are on Sissy, Marco Rubio, others. Tom Cotton's on Sissy. He's hardly a flaming
This is the Special
liberal.
Intelligence Committee. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the folks who have seen the information, I think have the same perspective I have. Those who have not seen the information, I don't know what informs their perspective.
All right. Congressman Trey Gowdy, nice to have you back at the table. Last time you were with Tim Scott in your book.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you
for coming back.
It is Thursday, the 31st of May of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Well, folks, a little down today. Heard some tragic news. Just found out that Bruin Kid, longtime presence at Daily Kos and many Netroots Nation gatherings, prominent team member on the pub quiz at each of those Netroots Nations. He passed a couple of days ago, and we send our condolences to his family and to the rest of the Daily Kos community. Very sad story. Much too young. I always liked Bruin Kid. Engaged with him a little. And very sad news. Also, yesterday, found out late in the afternoon, one of my sister-in-laws, my brother's first wife, I should say, they had a troubled relationship. Had 4 kids and doted on those kids, I will say. Kids are all grown. But Karen went to the doctors yesterday complaining of chest pains, and they ran a series of tests on her, I think an EKG or whatever it is, electrocardiogram. Nothing showed up, and they sent her home, and her husband kept trying to call her. She had gone into the doctor about 8-ish or so, 8:30-ish. Called her at home, no answer. He rushed home from work well before lunch and discovered that she had passed, and presumably from a heart attack. Age 59. My brother and she started having kids when they were still in high school, and like I said, had a troubled relationship, but still dealt admirably with raising their children, like, as I said, are now grown and a slew of grandkids. So that came as shocking news. 59 is far too young. She had suffered anxiety through her life, which is rough because sometimes you can just pass off, people's medical concerns as like, well, she's just having an anxiety attack again. And I wonder if maybe that informed what went on at the doctors, though the test didn't show up that she had anything wrong, which can happen. I have a friend who had his aortic valve replaced, and for years they couldn't diagnose the problem. And he had problems, and he would pass it off as anxiety. And he went in for a hip replacement, and somehow the leakage finally showed up on a test. And he had his aortic valve replaced. My God. I'm thinking 30 years ago, they wouldn't have been able to replace an aortic valve, and he would have been dead. But sad news all around. It's hard to get jovial and jocular. So I'll muddle on. My grandson graduates from high school a week from tomorrow, and then he will be heading off to Germany for the summer on an educational junket. And so there's there's the end of life stories, and then there's the stories of young adults taking their first steps into the world of adults. And such is life. Life is transitory. Life is suffering. And really, really all that we should do is love each other. All right, what do we have going on the menu for the rest of the day? Well, of course, that was Trey Gowdy at the top there. Still giving Trump a little bit of leeway. All right, let's be clear. You know, and when Trey Gowdy says, oh, no, he should have been able to, hire the attorney general he wanted. Well, the attorney general is not the president of the United States' personal attorney. He has his personal attorney. The attorney general is the lawyer or the prosecutor for the United States. And then it occurred to me, I have come to believe that Trump believes he is America. So the hats that say "Make America Great Again," it's not the amorphous entity that we all know and love and pledge allegiance to. Make America Great Again is make Trump great again, as if he was ever great to begin with. See, that's the problem. To be great again, you had to have been great to begin with. And greatness does not embody writing Twitter feeds for your wife, Melanie. Okay. Or, I don't know, maybe he kicked it down to some subordinate, and that's why Melania's name was spelled Melanie, at least once. So, big speculation on whether Melania actually wrote this last Twitter announcement that she's okay, because too much of the language is exactly how Donnie Two Scoops speaks. Well, on the rest of the menu, in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, the NRA warned Dick's Sporting Goods the retailer was doomed, but sales actually soared after the company ceased selling military-style assault weapons. Yeah, okay, they're doing good now. I have to admit, now in Rogue River, we have a pharmacy and a general mercantile store here, and it's called Rogue River Guns and Drugs because they sell a whole line of weaponry, mostly for hunting, but I don't know. It looks like some of the weapons they have are for hunting humans because there would be too much damage to the meat if you were hunting for food. And I don't know, if you're hunting for a trophy, I guess, I don't know, maybe it's okay. But guns and drugs, they make a joke about it. But because it is, my little town store and pharmacy, I do go in there. But I have to admit, I tend not to want to go into the stores that, have a whole section for weaponry. And Dick's Sporting Goods getting rid of their weaponry, or at least the military-style weaponry, and their sales soar. Who knew? Let's see. Oh, and FEMA. Oh, my God. FEMA. Now, let's be clear. Roseanne was on page A1. Puerto Rico was on, page A30 or something in the New York Times, somewhere around there. Well, FEMA spent $75 million to dock a half-empty cruise ship off Puerto Rico for 4 months, and guess what? That was more than it spent on direct home rebuilding grants to citizens of the island in the same time frame. Because a contract's a contract, and they had already contracted for the cruise ship. Of course, the cruise ship did have a maximum occupancy, which would only be half of what it could actually hold, apparently. I don't know. After the break, we'll then move to the chef's table, where, thanks to the negligence of the Trump White House, 71 federal agencies are deemed at risk or high risk of cyber attacks due to inadequate cybersecurity programs. And they got rid of the cybersecurity czar because, I don't know, when you're in cahoots with a hostile foreign power, you don't want them to be found out. And Dick Tuck, the one-time Democratic Party operative who made a career of political pranks, subterfuge, and specializing in tormenting Richard Nixon, has died at the age of 94. Another sad story, but what a life. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You'll notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, monitors that throughout the day, and she may be monitoring it in real time so that she can engage with you. And it is the chat room link, after all. So go there. That's a good way to engage with us. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of the homepage at netrootsradio.com are the contribute donate buttons, which are integral parts of this operation. Your generosity allows us to continue with Resistance Radio. We are truly unable to do this without you, and thank you so much. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform. You can go to Facebook, we're there also, and I guess I'm taking care of that. I don't know. I post on there occasionally, but I check in. You can follow me at Netroots on Twitter as at Justice Putnam. I'm sorry, I'm a little discombobulated from these tragedies that I've had to deal with here. So bear with me. I'm sorry. Okay, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. The show notes and links diary on Daily Co's posts about 10 minutes before showtime. And there's a lot there that rounds out the show, so do check that out. Podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy can be had by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Okay, let's get started here. This first article about Dick's Sporting Goods comes out of Share Blue Media by Oliver Willis. Well, the most recent quarterly results show that the NRA's barrage of attacks has proven impotent in the real world. The NRA had warned Dick's Sporting Goods, you take military-style weapons out of your store, we're going to boycott you. You'll go out of business. Well, apparently in the real world, sales go up. They were up 4.6% from a year ago, and the company's stock increased by 23% with the unexpectedly strong returns. Wall Street has estimated the retailer's profits would be $1.88 billion, and the actual number turned out to be $1.91 billion. Wow. Jeez. Dick's. CNBC reported the strong earnings eased concerns that restrictions that placed on gun purchases would hurt its sales. In February, Dick's said it would pull military-style assault weapons from its shelves. The announcement came after the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, where the perpetrator used an AR-15 to kill 17 people. Radiologist Heather Shearer, who treated victims of the shooting, described the effect of such weapons in chilling terms. Nothing was left to repair, and utterly, devastatingly, nothing could be done to fix the problem. The injury was fatal. And military veterans have described the weapons or the guns as weapons of war, with no place in civilian hands. But the extremists at the NRA don't care and have repeatedly opposed efforts to ban assault weapons. They are unmoved by the body count of American children killed just for attending school. As part of that campaign, the NRA has been steadily attacking Dick's Sporting Goods. The radical group called the retailer a thing of the past. It falsely said the company continues to infringe on our Second Amendment rights, one step at a time. I wonder if they're getting help from, a Cyrillic writing country. I wonder. NRA spokesperson Dana Loesch complained Dick's was trying to bend a knee to people who don't shop with you in the first place. These people. Discussing the company's post-Parkland decisions, the NRA said Dick's has inserted itself into a tight spot from which it might not emerge unscathed if it manages to survive at all. The group added that Dick's business with Second Amendment supporters in particular may well grind to a halt. The fallout from the supposed loss of support Dick's was risking by embracing the position of most Americans would be massive, the NRA argued. Dick's example should serve as a warning for other businesses in the firearms sector, the NRA warned, that would hope to find common cause with activists who are seeking nothing so much as to put gun sellers out of business for good. But, as has often been the case, the NRA's bark was worse than its bite, and corporate America is well aware of that. The NRA, after all, backed the candidate who lost the popular vote in the last 3 presidential elections, so perhaps its powers of prediction are not as strong as it believes. Rather than crumbling, Dick's is thriving, proving that it is not necessary to capitulate to the NRA's extremism. The free market has spoken, and the NRA has lost again. Next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is by Eric Bullard out of Share Blue Media. Oh, before I start, yesterday I had reported on the story of the Russian Putin critic who had been shot in the back in his apartment, and his wife had discovered him, and it was another one of those convenient killings. Turned out it had been staged. And apparently the Ukrainian security and intelligence agencies were trying to ferret out actual Russian assassins who were coming after this guy. So sorry about that. Like I say, I put myself in a bubble, and then it's like too late to change things. It really is sucky. During our break, though, the World in 2 Minutes will get you up to date on that story. Okay, so thousands could lose their livelihoods because of Trump's stupid trade war, and this is just in the auto trade war. And also, guess what? Every American who buys, or Americans would also pay $6,000 more for every foreign-built car purchased in the U.S., all because of Trump's thoughtless policies. So let's see. The Trade Partnership, a study from the Trade Partnership, concludes that they find that the tariffs would have a very small positive impact on high-skilled workers in the motor vehicle and parts sectors, but very large negative impacts on workers, both high and lower skilled, in other sectors of the economy. Specifically, while the auto tariffs would increase jobs in the auto sector by 92,000, it would destroy 250,000 jobs in the rest of the economy. It would also raise the price of a foreign car purchased in the U.S. by 21%. Wow, thanks. And economists continue to warn that Trump's tariffs pose a real danger to the U.S. economy. Even the Republican-friendly U.S. Chamber of Commerce warned that the latest proposed tariffs would deal a staggering blow to the very industry it purports to protect and would threaten to ignite a global trade war. And Trump's trade war was already shown to overwhelmingly hurt people and companies and states that he won in 2016. After he unveiled his first wave of import tariffs, China retaliated by imposing its own stiff taxes on 182 incoming American products, including pork and soybeans. Of the 10 largest pork-producing states in America, 8 voted for Trump. Yeah, you always hurt the ones that, love you. Right? Right. Trump has insisted the trade wars are good and easy to win, but he's not the one on the front lines fighting them. And tens of thousands of Americans who may lose their jobs will likely beg to differ. Here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro, Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, is an article out of Think Progress by Alan Pike. The company behind Carnival Cruises got more money from the federal government in connection with hurricanes that leveled much of Puerto Rico than the amount given to Puerto Ricans to rebuild their homes over the first 4 months of relief efforts, when FEMA needs to house support staffers providing relief to storm-torn islands. It seeks floating shelter for them to avoid exacerbating crowding on land. But in its rush to secure private sector boat housing for relief workers, FEMA funneled $75 million to the Panama-based cruise line in a contract that billed the government more than twice as much per head as the company charges paying customers. Contracts obtained by the Miami-based radio station WLRN show. FEMA paid. See, I like this. Okay, Carnival, let's gouge the government in this tragedy. We won't be doing our civic duty. We'll be making as much money, in fact, more. Yeah, capitalize on the tragedy. Where have I heard that before? FEMA paid Carnival $75 million to rent the vessel Fascination from mid-October to early February. At that point, FEMA had dispersed less than $70 million in direct rebuilding efforts to survivors of the storms on Puerto Rico. Only later in March, about a month and a half after the Carnival agreement expired, did FEMA dollars dispersed to residents catch up with the contract. The ugly optics of the Carnival boondoggle are exacerbated by the news that FEMA used less than half of the onboard housing capacity it paid the company to secure. It's not the first time the agency has spent millions of dollars on half-empty cruise ships docked alongside still devastated communities, primarily home to people of color. After Hurricane Katrina, George W. Bush's FEMA head Michael Brown signed off on a $236 million contract with Carnival for a trio of ships that were never more than half full. And the carnival scheme is only the latest example of what Naomi Klein calls disaster capitalism. See, I told you. The carnival deal is a drop in the bucket next to the sum total appropriated for Hurricane Maria relief efforts, which measure in the tens of billions. But where that money is slow and inconsistent in reaching those it's intended to help, Carnival got paid with all the digital efficiency of any other corporate vendor doing business with the U.S. government. The news of the half-empty $75 million cruise ship that FEMA called a floating hotel comes hard on the heels of a fresh estimate of the death toll from the storm that we reported on yesterday. Because these new estimates raise the total from 64 dead to a little over 5,000. The day that new estimate broke, cable news networks covered the shocking Puerto Rico death toll estimate for a combined 30 minutes. But they did spend more than 10 hours talking about Roseanne. Because there's always that. All right. Well, I don't know. I think they're both important stories, but Puerto Rico should have been on A1. Let's be clear. Okay, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Google and Facebook both do a nice job identifying your friends in photos, a testament to how good machines have gotten at studying human faces. But how well would an algorithm fare when pitted against a forensic facial examiner, the experts that testify in court?
Well, it turns out that the best algorithm is comparable to the best humans.
Jonathan Phillips, a facial recognition scientist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. He and his colleagues presented 20 very difficult image pairs to human experts and a range of algorithms. And the most up-to-date algorithms did indeed perform as well as the skilled humans. But when Phillips and his team asked for input from 2 humans, or a human and an algorithm, it was the combined judgment of humans and machines that won out, providing near-perfect results, which suggests the pooled strengths and weaknesses of human brains and computer code add up to superior accuracy. The studies in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Phillips says it's now up to the facial recognition community to use these findings to improve the tests in real-world settings. And don't worry, human recognizers won't be out of a job anytime soon.
Just because an algorithm says, I give you a high score, you don't just accept the word of that black box. You develop ways of integrating human judgment into the decision that you get out of an algorithm itself.
After all, someone, preferably a human, still has to explain the findings in court. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
It's been pointed out that Donnie Trump has unusually small hands. But who cares? What's truly alarming are his unusually small policy ideas. Draining the swamp, for example. He bragged that he'd be stronger than Drano, promising he'd rid Washington of its infestation with lobbyists, corporate favor seekers, and other swamp critters. But he betrayed that populist pledge from the very start, staffing his entire presidency with CEOs, lobbyists, and Republican megadonors who are gleefully rigging the system for themselves against the rest of us. Also, remember how candidate Trump blistered the behinds of Wall Street's billionaire hedge fund hucksters for getting rich by destroying middle-class jobs? He promised that, by gollies, he would take away their loophole that lets them escape paying taxes they owe. But as president, he wimped out, handing $1 trillion tax cut to the billionaires, including meekly leaving the pampered hedge funders' loophole entirely untouched. And where's that Make America Great guy who claimed that only he had the vision and chutzpah to rebuild America, pledging to launch $1 trillion investment in our national infrastructure? His chutzpah petered out and his vision shriveled to a hokey scheme of smoke and mirrors, basically asking states and corporations to come up with the money and calling on them to privatize our public infrastructure. Where's the greatness in that? This is Jim Hightower saying, poor Donnie wants to be thought of as a modern-day Teddy Roosevelt, so he constantly poses as a populist, bigger-than-life bull moose character who's got the right stuff to bust the profiteering trusts in order to stop their rip-offs and their schemes to knock down the middle class. Sadly, though, a pose is all it is, for he's just a run-of-the-mill plutocratic president who speaks loudly but carries nothing bigger than a limp twig when it comes to dealing with the corporate powers.
Another day, another mass shooting at another school. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. This time in Santa Fe, Texas. And so one more time, America is debating the Second Amendment, which says, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment was interpreted by the Supreme Court in 2008 in the Heller case. There, the court found that the words about a militia didn't mean much of anything and ruled that the Second Amendment created an individual right to guns. But that right, according to the majority opinion written by Justice Scalia, is not unlimited. Quote, nothing in this opinion shall be taken to cast doubt on the long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. End quote. And so, while it is absolutely correct that gun laws in the United States now must be governed by the Second Amendment and some things remain undecided, it is also true that many gun safety laws proposed in recent years are not prohibited by that constitutional provision. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Wednesday, May 30th, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. The global unions Industrial and Public Services International, the PSI, have signed a global framework agreement with EDF, the world's largest producer of electricity. The agreement covers more than 160,000 EDF employees working in 24 countries. At the signing ceremony in Geneva, the General Secretary of Industrial, Walter Sanchez, was asked if the agreement would solve all the problems that might arise in labor management relations.
It's natural that conflicts will arise, but we have, from this agreement, we have a good playing field for us that we know that we can work together to work things out.
EDF was represented at the signing ceremony by its Chief Executive Officer, Jean-Bernard Lévy.
Voilà, je suis convaincu, je voudrais le souligner, sur le fait que notre démarche de
I am convinced, said Mr. Lévy, that EDF's approach to social responsibility is a factor in the good performance of our company. For a company to work well, it needs to put into place agreements such as this and build a culture of social responsibility. It is important to emphasize that this is the approach that EDF adheres to.
Ça me paraît important de souligner que c'est dans cette démarche que s'inscrit EDF.
The other global union which signed the global framework agreement with EDF is Public Services International. PSI represents 20 million public sector workers around the world. Rosa Pavanelli is the PSI's General Secretary.
We agreed that this renewed global frame agreement automatically applies to all EDF groups, workers, and operations worldwide. High expectations always bring big responsibilities and demand strong leadership and accountability. Today's signature is just the beginning of the work that we have to do.
The global framework agreement between EDF, PSI, and Industrial was signed, appropriately enough, during the annual conference of the International Labour Organization in Geneva. The ILO sets the core labor standards which companies accept when they sign the agreements. Guy Ryder is the Director General of the ILO. He is the first trade unionist to lead the organization in its 99-year history.
I want to congratulate you for showing an example and showing leadership, both through EDF and your Global Union Federation partners. If there are ways in which the International Labour Organization can support, please rely on this organization to do just that.
The Global Union Industrial represents 50 million workers in a wide range of industries, from mining to manufacturing to garment production. When it comes to global framework agreements, Industrial has a particular focus on workers and companies in the textile and clothing industries. It has produced a video on how the agreements work.
One of Industrial's key strategies to protect workers' rights is to sign global framework agreements with global brands and retailers. These agreements are very different from unilateral company codes of conduct, as they are negotiated between Industrial and the company. By signing a global framework agreement, the multinational brand commits to requiring their suppliers to comply with the core labor standards of the ILO, to respect the rights of workers to join trade unions and to bargain collectively, and to prevent discrimination, forced labor, and child labor. Suppliers are also required to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. Brands that sign global framework agreements give Industrial the names and locations of the factories where their clothes are made. Local unions can use this information to contact workers in these factories and make sure that the standards in the agreement are being respected. The agreements can require suppliers to treat unions positively and to stay neutral when their workers are choosing whether to join a union. This can include facilitating union access to supplier factories. Unions representing workers in the supplier factories of global framework agreements brands have a strong role to play in ensuring that the agreement is respected.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. A top North Korean official widely viewed as Kim Jong-un's right-hand man is due to land in New York on Wednesday for talks with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Kim Yong-chul, a top diplomat and nuclear weapons official, is subject to U.S. sanctions imposed by President Obama in 2010. Those sanctions blamed Kim for ordering an attack on a South Korean naval vessel that killed more than 40 sailors. It's likely Kim chose to travel to New York, given that North Korea doesn't have an embassy in Washington, but maintains a small office space on 2nd Avenue in New York, manned by the country's UN ambassador. According to the State Department, Secretary Pompeo has a meeting with President Trump scheduled for Wednesday afternoon before he flies to New York. And get this, when news broke Tuesday of the murder of a Russian journalist, Arkady Babchenko, in Kiev, Ukraine, it turns out it was deliberate fake news. One of Ukraine's top cops admitted Wednesday Babchenko is very much alive and that his staged murder was part of an attempt to capture those believed to be hunting the journalist down. Babchenko shocked reporters by appearing in person at a news conference Wednesday and was emotionally distraught as Ukrainian officials announced that one alleged assassin had been arrested as a part of a sting operation after Ukraine learned of a Russian plot to kill the journalist. A former Russian soldier, Babchenko went on to become an acclaimed war correspondent and a vocal critic of Russia's military activities in Ukraine and Syria. The Russian government has been known to order the killings of provocative reporters in the past. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, some 38 reporters have been targeted for murder within Russia since 1992, with justice served in only 5 of those deaths. Luke Vargas, The United Nations. Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Hey, there is no Old Bay, all right, in any of these dishes at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. For Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, maybe a little bit of jambalaya, maybe a little bit of spice in your life. All right. We always like to begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees. We are slated for a high, they say 65, but I think it'll be probably maybe 70. And though we now, just within the last couple of hours, they are now raising the percentage of precipitation possibilities up to 20%, which is, to me, that could mean rain. Though the relative humidity, let's check that out. Yeah, the relative humidity is at 68%, which is indicative of dry conditions. Who knows? Maybe they didn't catch up with the relative humidity yet. Though 20%. We do have a cloud cover and will be cloudy for the rest of the day. That's why we will be relatively cool. Though tomorrow we should go up to the upper 70s, low 80s, and we will be bouncing back and forth between upper 70s, low 80s through the weekend. All right, let's do it. What else? Winds are negligible at 1 mile per hour out of the southwest. Of course, they will increase to their usual 5 to 10 miles per hour later on this morning, but shifting out of the west to northwest and west-northwest. And then later on tonight, maintaining the same 5 to 10 mile per hour winds will then be out of the northwest. And then we'll have a high tomorrow of 80, and winds will be light and variable. We'll see how that is. Grass pollen is still high. Air quality index is good at 11, so that's getting down there. That's good, though the daytime UV is still at 9, even with the cloud cover. So if you have those numbers, take care. All right, pressure is holding at 29.85. I'm sorry. It's falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is at 9 miles. And as I mentioned, relative humidity is at 69%. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 69 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 77 and mostly cloudy. Both London and Paris are continuing to experience thunderstorm activity to the point that there is an advisory that infrastructure could be knocked out because of it. Rome is 81 and sunny. Kiev is 83 and fair. Kabul is 77 with showers in the vicinity. Are those bomb showers? No, it's rain. Hong Kong is 82 and clear. Tokyo is 67 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 53 and partly cloudy with wind. San Francisco, California is 51 and partly cloudy, and they continue to have their small craft advisory with close to gale force winds. And take care if you're in a small craft. Even in a big craft, you're going to get bounced around on the bay. So be careful. And New York is 67 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. That is weather from around the world, brought to you by People's Personal Weather Stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal purchased weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. First offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is by Carolyn Orr out of Share Blue Media. Hey, guess what? The Russians are coming, and Trump left the door wide open. Nearly 3/4 of the nation's federal agencies are not equipped to deal with cybersecurity attacks, according to a new government-wide review of cybersecurity risks. The finding would be alarming on its own, but that's not even the worst part. Thanks to the negligence of the Trump White House, the 71 federal agencies deemed at risk or high risk of cyber attacks due to inadequate cybersecurity programs are also woefully ill-equipped to develop better policies to detect and mitigate the threats. The Washington Post described the results of this report, spotlights how the federal government is still struggling to organize its cybersecurity efforts, and former White House and DHS officials worry that the Trump administration lacks a path forward without proper leadership at the top. Well, they're taking their leadership instructions by Vlad. Isn't it obvious? Jesus. Okay. Typically, the White House cybersecurity coordinator would lead such efforts, but earlier this month, the White House eliminated that position, which was created 9 years ago to designate a point person to take the lead on cybersecurity-related policies. Well, 9 years ago? Oh, you mean the black president put that in? Can't have that. At the time, cybersecurity expert Bruce Schneier slammed the decision to axe the job as a spectacularly bad idea. The move also flatly contradicted Trump's campaign rhetoric and exposed his hypocrisy on the issues. Remember how long he berated Hillary about her server and her emails? And as soon as he took office, unsecured telephones, opens up the cybersecurity defenses for, I don't know, a hostile power to take advantage of. All right. Well, actually, even if he hadn't done anything, would have been better. But not Trump. You know, if he had never, if he had just invested his money in small conservative investments instead of his building towers, he'd be really rich right now. Really rich. But that's not the way it goes for this guy. Okay, so the new report makes it clear that Trump's incompetence is having real-world effects and leaving us more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Even now, Trump is still not addressing these very real and very consequential national security issues. Instead, choosing to spend his time attacking the very agencies that are in charge of defending the threats that he refuses to acknowledge.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Finishing up here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is a story out of Reuters, reported by Bill Trott and Gina Chirelis. Dick Tuck, the one-time Democratic Party operative who made a career of political pranks, subterfuge, and specializing in tormenting Richard Nixon, has died at the age of 94. His longtime friend, Lorraine Glicksman, said. Tuck died on Monday in Tucson, Arizona. Glicksman, who said she was the executor of Tuck's estate, said in a Wednesday telephone interview, Tuck was Puck, Shakespeare's mischievous sprite from A Midsummer's Night Dream. If Puck had been a Democratic Party campaign consultant with a major fixation on Richard Nixon. I never tried to be malicious, Tuck said in explaining his strategy to Time magazine in 1973. It's the difference between altering fortune cookies to make a candidate look funny and altering State Department cables to make it look as if a former president was a murderer. Tuck did introduce bogus fortune cookies into a campaign. At a fundraiser for Republican Senator William Noland in 1958, he managed to have all the fortunes say Noland for Premier of Formosa, Taiwan. Tuck was a student at the University of California in Santa Barbara in 1950 when he first pranked Nixon, who had gone to the campus to campaign in his U.S. Senate race. Even though he was working for Nixon's opponent, Tuck was chosen to arrange the visit, which he did by booking a large auditorium and inviting only a few people. He introduced Nixon with a long, boring speech and then asked the confounded candidate to talk about the International Monetary Fund. Sometimes Tuck's pranks were mild, what he called teasing or dramatic effects. He was known to pose as a fire marshal at Nixon appearances and give reporters low estimates for the size of the crowds. When Nixon debated John F. Kennedy in the 1960 presidential race, he hired an elderly woman to approach Nixon afterward and say, "That's all right. You'll do better next time." Over the years, Tuck both confirmed and denied reports that he had donned a tradesman hat and waved a train out of the station while Nixon was speaking from its rear platform. How nice. This is not Lee Atwater stuff, okay? This actually has some fun to it. One of Tuck's most effective stunts came when Nixon was campaigning for governor in San Francisco's Chinatown neighborhood in 1962. People in the crowd carried supportive signs in English and Chinese, except for the Tuck infiltrator, whose sign said in Chinese, "What about the Hughes loan?" a reference to a highly favorable loan that billionaire Howard Hughes made to Nixon's brother. When someone translated the sign for him, Nixon reportedly ripped it up. Now, Nixon was known for a paranoid personality, and Tuck gave him plenty to be paranoid about. During the 1968 presidential race, the Nixon campaign had several thousand buttons made with the slogan, "Nixon's the one," in various languages. The candidate was so concerned that Tuck had pulled something similar to his Chinatown stunt that he had the buttons destroyed. Ooh. Tuck also had more traditional political jobs, such as working on Robert F. Kennedy's 1968 presidential campaign. He ran for a seat in California Senate in 1966, but drew only 10% of the vote in the Democratic primary. "The people have spoken," he said. "The bastards." Tuck's Nixon animus did not wane with age. As he celebrated his 90th birthday in 2014, he said he wanted August 9, the day in 1974 that Nixon resigned, to be a national holiday. He would call it Nixmas. Indeed. Rest in peace, Tuck. And rest in peace to Bruin Kid and also my sister-in-law, Kita Alvarez. And folks, we have reached the end of our broadcast period, but we will be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes. And stay tuned for more breaking news. It looks like Trump's issuing pardons in a message to Cohen. And I see D'Souza's name coming up. What the hell? All right. So do visit with us tomorrow. Stay tuned for more breaking news on Netroots Radio. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum,